It's 12:05 in the afternoon right here on 90.3 FM. And we are all set and ready to enjoy another afternoon of Helping Seniors of Brevard Radio. I'm John Harper, and let's get things underway with I like to call it the Daily Double, because we get not only the Executive Director of Helping Seniors of Brevard, but the host of the program as well. Here is Kerry Fink. Hi, Kerry.
Hey, John Harper, and thank you. And it's always good to be on the radio here, lunchtime Wednesdays at 90.3 FM, WEJF. We get to spend the lunch hour together. And if you're joining us online at WEJF.net, welcome aboard. And if you're catching this as a podcast, like a growing number do, wherever you get a good podcast, thanks for tuning in. I think this show is going to be helpful because here we are again, John Harper. We're back at the end of the year. What happened this year? How did it fly by so fast?
Isn't that amazing? Or the old adage, the older you get, the faster the years go, and when you're younger, it seems like they take forever, right?
Yeah, you're counting the days till Santa Claus or something when you're young. And
that's right.
Yeah, it's a different thing. Now it's just like time flies when you're having fun. Well, it's an interesting conversation because here we are, we're on the brink of 2025, and we're in that window where we're just going crazy with all the holiday festivities and everything. And then, of course, very soon we'll turn the corner and start talking about our New Year's resolutions, which is usually to undo all the overeating we did during this part of the year. So, but with that, let me extend to you, listener, and everybody on the air, an invitation, because Helping Seniors, once again, together with the help of our great friends, Greg Kennedy, Alfredo, and all the fine team over at Zon Beachside, they have invited to host our Helping Seniors holiday festivities. And if you remember what we've typically done, we've made it a mid-morning drop-in kind of event. So it's daylight on all sides, easy to get to, easy to get away from. They're going to give us, once again, they're going to give us the top floor of that beautiful facility that they've called the Residences at Zon. And if you've ever been there, it's like some of the top-notch independent living, and it's connected right next door with the Zon Beachside Assisted Living and Memory Care. So the idea is whatever's going on, you're going to have kind of a pathway to call it home for literally as long as you would care to. And so the Residences at Zon, last year, they allowed us to have our holiday festivities morning up there. It was so pleasant. They've got the swimming pool. They've got that great rooftop restaurant. There's all kinds of things, and it's going to be fun. It's from 10:30 to 12 noon. So I'm going to give you a second to grab a pencil so you can jot some of the particulars down. 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon. And it is a week from tomorrow, which makes it, if I'm looking at a calendar correctly, is that the 12th or is it the 14th? But it's a week from Thursday. It will be, he said, grabbing his phone so he could say this correctly, it's going to be the 12th, December 12th, 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon at the Residences Zon, which is the street address for that is 1898 South Patrick Drive, and it's right across the bridge. So if you come over from the mainland side, you're just coming across the O'Galley Causeway, hanging a left on South Patrick Drive, and it's like maybe a mile up on the left. In fact, many of you may know it because originally in pre-COVID days, it was the home of the original Helping Seniors Resource Center, because they were kind enough to let us kind of get that whole concept off the ground there. So no strangers to our friends at Zon Beachside. And if you've ever been around there, you know they have great food. Their chef and everybody there is just terrific in that. So there's going to be some great snacks. We're also bringing in a gentleman. His name, we call him Uncle Nick. That's what he likes to be called. His name is Nick Chirico. He's a great entertainer. I'm sure he's going to bring a Santa cap and do lots of nice holiday music to give us a good soundtrack as well. And I know Karen Warnland, who is our center director there at Joe Senior Resource Center, she is really going to want to take a moment to highlight the great volunteers that have helping seniors make this year go. You know, she's got up to, I think, 10 volunteers now who are in the office helping us do all the work of helping seniors. And I think there's a training class for 7 more. And it's not too late if you want to get involved in either one of those sides of it. Whether you want to RSVP, we would appreciate that so we don't run out of victuals, as they used to say. We want to know that you're coming so we can plan correctly. Or maybe you are interested in a volunteer opportunity with the Helping Seniors organization. You just give Karen a call at 321-473-7770 and just let her know for one or the other. So again, that number 321-473-7770. And as I open up the program, we were talking about the end of the year and the start of a new year, and it creates a lot of legal questions. So we thought we would call in the best hotshot that I know about stuff like this. His name is Bill Johnson. He's board-certified elder law attorney. He has been friends with the Helping Seniors Network, goes all the way back to the day that Joe began the Helping Seniors, talking about Joe Steckler, our founder, chairman emeritus, and also the guy who put together Brevard Alzheimer's, got the Joe's Clubs going. We decided to name the Senior Resource Center after Joe. We just can't laud Joe enough for all his great work for seniors in our county. And Bill, maybe you'll be able to pop into the Christmas festivities there at Zahn. You're invited too.
Well, thank you.
But here we are. We're at Christmas time, and I was just talking to some people about the fact that people move around a lot. There people go up north for the holidays. Bill and I were trading stories about travels around Thanksgiving and things like that. But people are moving back and forth, and particularly this year, they're up north, they're down south. We have snowbirds, we have all those things. And as you and I were trading emails back and forth, said, what should we talk about? And we said, let's put the wrap on this year and plan for next year. And let's talk about some of the things that are probably wise for us to consider as we move into a new year. And I know, Bill, we've talked so many times legally, it has to do with all your paperwork and things like that. But what are some things that you talk to clients and say, guys, this is a good time of the year to... from there?
Well, we just had Thanksgiving and we have Christmas coming up. And usually that is a good time of the year where families get together. And it's a good time to take advantage of that time together to talk about what is, your estate plan, who's going to make decisions for you in the event you become incapacitated. Things like that, to basically bring up family affairs, for lack of a better word. And you could all do that together if you so choose. But it would be a good time of the year. And also, when you get together, things may not be as they had seemed on the phone.
Yeah.
You may show up and, your parent has said, oh, yeah, we're doing good, we're doing fine. And then you show up and the house is in disarray, they're barely able to walk, things like that, and things might be much worse. And that is usually a call to action to get them to get their documents done and then look at what their needs might be from a healthcare side. That's what happens a lot, actually, is that family from out of town shows up and goes, oh my gosh, you've been living like this and we need to get your affairs in order. And that usually is a call to action to get them to start thinking about, their estate planning, their incapacity planning, how are they going to pay for long-term care, those kinds of things.
I was thinking about, as you were sharing that, Jennifer Barton, who is the head of Seniors Helping Seniors, and she's done so much over the years to help us in the helping seniors world. She always talks about the fact that they get all this flurry of calls as right after holidays, because I guess what happens is the adult kids, fly in for Thanksgiving or Christmas or, Hanukkah or whatever the holiday is that they're celebrating. They come in. And then they realize it's like a shock, just like you said. They've been talking to mom on the phone. How you doing? Fine. Okay, we'll see you next week, and we'll call you next week. But when they get there and they see what's really going on, they feel like somehow it may be a little bit dangerous for the seniors at that point, and they get concerned and say, we got to do something.
And we would agree with that. And we get a flurry of activity too.
Yeah.
Because, they show up and they're like, oh, you can't live like this.
Right.
And, we got to consider maybe assisted living. And then, of course, then the next question, how are we going to pay for that? And then what happens if you become incapacitated? Do you have the documents done? That kind of thing. And so we have a flurry of activity after the major holidays as well.
I was thinking about that because when you flip on the TV these days, you get nothing about one commercial after another. And they're usually talking about, right now, of course, they've been talking about the annual enrollment period for Medicare. And, it's always called this 800 number. They're going to look up your zip code and look up where you live and try to give you plans and things like that. And we always talk about the wisdom of not calling the 800 number, not because maybe those people don't mean well, but simply because they don't live here where we live and know where doctors are, know where hospitals are, know where labs are, all the different things that might be important. And they understand the geography of our area, and so they're not going to recommend a doctor in Titusville to somebody who lives in Satellite Beach, as just an example. But I also see all these commercials, that they're talking about, you should be thinking about doing your paperwork, and, you can do this real simply. Just click a few buttons online, and your estate planning is done. And I know, Bill, that this is a little bit of a setup because you and I have talked about this so many times that as you get toward the end of the year, you start thinking about these things because we've just been trained over the years to, now what's your plan for next year? And you say, okay, we always say, Joe calls it an aging plan. We always say getting your ducks in a row, but we're always saying okay, let's see if we can get ahead of the 8 ball. But we don't want people to get ahead of the 8 ball the wrong way. And you and I have talked so much about the dangers of do-it-yourself documents, whether it's on computer or with that nice lady at church who says, I know how to do this, or those kind of things. You see this all the time.
We do. And also you don't get a face-to-face with an elder law attorney.
Yeah.
So, you may be going to the office to, get your will done and your power of attorney and healthcare surrogate. And then you may roll into my office in a wheelchair and your wife's, on a cane. And that may just simply lead you down to what have you considered long-term care?
Yeah.
And, if you're doing these on the computer isn't going to ask you that.
Wow.
So there's a lot more to it than just simply doing some pieces of paper. And you can have a meaningful discussion with an attorney, about the, instead of just putting a name down, well, is that person good with money? Is that person trustworthy? Those kinds of conversations. So there's a lot of benefit to going to a law office.
Well, and I wanted to, this is the point I really wanted to hone in for just a minute because, things always, we live in a world where everything is a TikTok video. We're going to show you how to take your engine apart and put it back together in your car in 3 minutes. And they make everything look really simple when you see the little video. But I was just thinking, if you've ever filled out any kind of a government form where they want you to go online and do something. They always have these little, they call them radio boxes where you check the one that here's your answers, 1, 2, or 3, which one applies, and you click the one you want. But then you can get sometimes, Bill, I don't know if it's happened to you, but I'll look at one of those and I'll go, well, it's not 1 and it's not 2. It's 1.5. It's in between. But you can't ask the computer that. You have to. That's where the value of somebody with expertise comes in.
And correct. You know how to manage those sometimes difficult questions you haven't thought of. You may say, I want to leave everything to my 2 kids. Well, you can easily put that into a computer program, but does the computer ask you, well, what happens if one of your kids predeceases you? Yeah. Where do you want that share to go? Do you want to go to your other kid, or do you want it to go to the deceased child's children, or do you want it to go somewhere else completely?
Yeah.
And, those programs just don't ask you those kinds of things.
Well, it's not only that, but it's also, isn't it also the fact that when you go through a program like that, we've laughed about it, but it's not funny, but you've had clients come in to your office with paperwork and they just thought having a witness or whatever was optional.
Right.
And then the paperwork doesn't work at the minute it needs to.
Yeah, I've said, about 50% of the documents I've seen, the do-it-yourself stuff, is all executed wrong or not even signed, or well, it doesn't have the witnesses, doesn't have the notary. So they usually come in kind of all messed up.
Yeah, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And then I've also heard horror stories, Bill, from along the way of people who went to, maybe they had a family attorney who helped them with some, issue that they had in their family. And then they sat down with that person and said, oh, by the way, would you draft a will? And then there was a problem with that will later because that person isn't aware of some of the nuances. I'll use the example. You wouldn't go to a podiatrist if you're if your doctor said you need, I don't know, a cardiologist or something. You're going to go to the person that is the expert in that zone.
Correct.
So, I guess as we get to the end of the year and people start making these plans and making these thoughts, there's a whole nother dynamic just beyond just the paperwork that you would want to have, the basic paperwork. But it's also, you got to start thinking in this kind of four-dimensional arena of Medicare planning, or maybe if you were in the service, maybe VA planning can come in. There's all these things because it's not simple, right? They have all these look-back periods and all these rules and assets and Medicare planning and all those kind of things.
Correct. And you would have to, you're not going to learn that online either.
No.
And you're going to have to go to somebody who practices in that area. When we have the families get together, it's a good time to assess what have the changes in the family been.
Yeah.
Because, if people have gotten divorced, people have died, people have gotten sick, people have moved away, people have married, people have had kids, and then you got to kind of break out your documents and see how all those changes affect what your estate plan and incapacity plan is. If you have named somebody as your power of attorney, and all of us, because they were close, and next thing you know, their job transferred them across the country, is that really who you still want? Yeah. Or have you named, your daughter-in-law, because she's a nurse, as your healthcare surrogate, yet in the past year, her and your son got divorced. Oh. And, so those kinds of things you really got to think of, and did you name somebody as your trustee? And at the family dinner, you find out that they just had a stroke. And that's not probably who you want to put all the pressure of being a trustee on.
Well, and then there's stuff that happens in families. Somebody ends up going to jail or something.
Correct.
It's just incredible. I remember one conversation you and I were having about when a lot of times, well, it's easy. I'm just going to, transfer the house over to the kids or something like that. So I'm going to stick my name on their title or something. And that way it's all said and done. But we've talked about how dangerous that can be, and that it also opens you up to liability for whatever happens with the children as well. Like if they get into a mess now, you may not have that asset you thought because it's tied up in some court situation or something.
Very true, very true. And, especially if you add a kid's name and to the house and they don't live in the house, then there's a fraction of your homestead that is no longer homestead protected from creditors' claims.
Wow, I didn't even think about it. It was funny because we were Thanksgiving up in Georgia, and we were talking to, he's retired, and he actually was asking some questions just generally about trying to get his ducks in a row. And, I was explaining to him how favorable Florida rules are in many respects. I don't know much about Georgia or how it works, but it was just like I have been around you long enough to learn that we get some protections in Florida that may not apply in other states. Like I remember one, and you can correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but that at the end of the day, if you set it up right, Medicare doesn't really come for your primary residence.
And Medicaid, you mean?
Medicaid, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Correct. In Florida, we have a very strong protection against creditors' claims. There's only 5 things that they can come and take your house for. If you don't pay your property taxes, you don't pay your mortgage, somebody works on your house, you don't pay them, and then they go through a process of getting what's called a mechanic's lien. They can foreclose on your house. You don't pay your homeowner or condo association dues. they can come after the house. And of course, if you don't pay your federal income taxes, they can. But that's really it. Those are the five main things that. So notice I did not say Medicaid putting a lien on the house. I did not say nursing homes coming after your house. None of them can touch your house. And this homestead protection is so good that even when you die and pass it to a family member, the house is still protected.
Yeah, it just seems like there's so many nuances that where Florida has some protections for seniors that seem beneficial, and particularly if you're a snowbird, then it would seem like you probably want to sit down with somebody who knows what's going on and figure out, should I be a Florida resident or should I be an up north resident, you know?
Correct. I mean, the advantages to being a Florida resident is we don't have state income tax.
Right.
We do not have an estate tax.
Yeah.
We do not have an inheritance tax. We probably have slightly higher property taxes because we don't have those other taxes.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there's a lot of benefits to having yourself designated as a Florida resident.
But see, these are things that, again, clicking around on a computer program, it's not going to help you weigh out things like that. It's not going to help you with the strategy. If you know how to answer the questions correctly, maybe you're going to get a document that's usable. But like we've also talked about, Bill, what a scary thing it is when you need that document to work and it doesn't.
Well, the example you gave of snowbird is a perfect one.
Yeah.
They're people originally from Michigan, and then they buy a house in Florida, and they spend half the year in Michigan and half the year in Florida. But they never really gave any thought of where should I really have my primary residence.
Right.
And it would be very easy to swap it from Michigan to Florida.
Right.
Because you're spending half the year in Florida and declare Florida as your primary residence. And then your estate won't be subject to all the taxes that Michigan has when you pass.
Yeah. Well, we're having a great conversation with board-certified elder law attorney, one of only two board-certified elder law attorneys. We're going to talk more about that on the second half of the Helping Seniors radio show, as we're giving you some things to think about as we get to the end of the year. But we'll be back with the second half of Helping Seniors radio in just a few moments.
12:33 in the afternoon on this Wednesday afternoon. You're listening to Helping Seniors radio, and we're going to get the next half hour underway. I'm John Harper. Kerry Fink is here. Kerry is our BOGO. You buy one and get one. And Kerry is the executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard, and he's also the host. So, Kerry, it's all yours.
Thank you. I love how these are getting even more creative as we go along in the descriptions, but I'll take it. It's all good. Listen, Helping Seniors, we're now closing in on 14 years of service in our community. And when Joe Steckler, our chairman, he's chairman emeritus, but he was our founder. And when he began the Helping Seniors organization all those years ago, it was on the heels of his great success in making things better for seniors and their families that were challenged with cognitive issues, because he built up that Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation, got those Joe's Clubs established, which carry his name to this day and make all this worthwhile. And if you know anything about Joe, he's the kind of person that every minute of every waking hour is saying, like, there's got to be more we can do for seniors. And I remember meeting him as a media guy because he said, Kerry, I really feel like we need to do media. And he meant radio and TV, and we publish in the Center of Senior Scene magazine each month, because he said, not only is it important to have help reacting to a situation, but sometimes you can either mitigate it or maybe even avoid a problem when you do things with a little bit of planning. So he always talked about a thing called an aging plan. We kind of euphemistically call it getting your ducks in a row. We're just trying to make it sound a little lighter. Sometimes aging plan sounds like, I have to write a theme, or something complicated. And really it's not, because two of the things that we have added as corollaries to getting your ducks in a row is, number one, don't try this on your own. So the first half of the show, we've been talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of William A. Johnson. And one of the things, welcome back, Bill.
Well, thank you, Kerry.
One of the things that we've talked about so often about don't try this on your own, and we were spending some time in the first half of the show talking about as you get to the end of the year and you start making all these plans, I want to get this right next year. I know the mistakes. I put this off. That's, by the way, that's corollary number 2. Don't be an ostrich and put this stuff off because it doesn't really get better with time. In fact, one of the areas, Bill, there's 7 big areas that we've identified as part of an aging plan. But literally, one of the key things is this legal stuff because this is an area that doesn't wind up being a few dollars if you get it wrong. It could be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. And I'm sure you have enough tragic stories to tell that it makes you want to scream from a rooftop. Come in, let's do this now.
I do, and it can cost lots of money if you don't do it correctly.
Yeah, because you and I have even been through some of these conversations about when you do the planning for Medicaid, and these things that are very complicated, very technical, that as a layperson, if you will, we wouldn't necessarily understand. But they have these look back periods, and you put a kid on a bank account, and I think you and I have had the conversation that if you miscalculate, yeah, they'll give you the benefit, but they're going to take off a number of months for whatever, quote, you gifted out. So potentially, you said like a nursing facility could cost $10,000+ a month?
Yeah, it's over that, 13,000.
Wow. And so if they say, okay, we'll help you, but we're not going to help you for a year because you did this, now you've got 13,000 times 12, which I can't do that math in my head, but I know it's a big number.
It is a big number. Yeah.
It's one of those things you publish. Speaking of helping people get ahead of this stuff, you have for years published a document that I think is a perfect primer on all this. You put it in the center of the Boomer Guide, which is a great resource we have in our community. Senior Life, the newspaper that everybody looks for once a month. They do an annual thing. I'm not sure if it's once a year or twice a year, but it's called the Boomer Guide. And they try to do a really good job of cataloging every resource that they can think of that's going to be useful to a senior or their family. But you published that book. Was it the long-term? What is the title of it now?
The Florida Long-Term Care and Nursing Home Answer Book.
And it's fascinating because even with a name that sounds a little bit long and intimidating, the way that you have laid it out, it's very plain English. Because I remember reading through this early on, and it really helped explain in plain English some of the things to think about. Because one of the problems is if we would think we're going to do something on our own, we don't even know the right questions to ask Bill a lot of times.
Very true, and that's why you could get with somebody who can lead you through it. There are resources that are on the internet. You can Google and things like that, but you really need to sit down with somebody who can bring it to life with your particular fact pattern.
Right, because that's another danger of like looking, especially I think with legal stuff, when you try to Google or look at stuff on an online search, you have several problems, right? Because if you ask a question like a legal type question, you're going to get all these answers in a millisecond. But some of them are going to be appropriate for the state of Washington or the state of California, which may or may not be having anything to do with how the laws are structured here in Florida. And we already spent some time on the first half of the show talking about the fact that it really does matter state to state how you're set up.
Correct. And again, a face-to-face meeting with somebody who can look at your particular fact pattern and really delve into the issues that they see as part of the planning for your wishes being met.
Well, and also you and I have talked about this a lot, is like you have to stay current, because the other problem with an internet thing is going to give you a case law from 10 years ago. And you and I have talked about the fact that a lot of people move in state, and maybe they had a power of attorney done up north by somebody who was eminently qualified in that state. It's not a question, but the state of Florida put in some things designed to protect the person And so there's things that the banks are going to look for, and things, I think you call them superpowers or something.
We do, and banks look for those, and the special, I call it the magic language that is in the power of attorney. But, even back to the Googling thing, you have to know what you're even looking for.
Right.
You may not have an idea of what you're looking for, and then even if you find it, you may not know or be familiar with the nomenclature.
Yeah.
And you may hear these big words, homestead and, creditors and exemptions and things like that, and you may not know what the heck they're talking about.
Yeah, we're kind of talking generally about things that you want to be aware of as we kind of close out a new year and begin and get ready for a new year. Because like I said, we're all in the holiday time. Everybody gets together. So it's a great time when everybody's together to maybe have these conversations. But it's also a good moment to start thinking about laying things out the right way with our New Year's resolutions for 2025. And I would argue getting our aging plan makes so much sense. And, we were saying...
I'll give you a perfect example
Please.
of that. I was just in California for Thanksgiving, and I was at my sister's house, and she has dementia.
Oh.
She's got Alzheimer's type dementia. And my brother-in-law took advantage of me being there and basically pulled out his documents and said, what should we do here? And I said, well, if you look at your power of attorney and your healthcare power of attorney, you probably don't want her making healthcare decisions and financial decisions for you at this point. It's fine that you can do it for her, but you probably want to name one of your kids now to make those decisions on your behalf.
Wow.
And then on the trust, him and his wife are the co-trustees of their trust. I suggested that they add one of the kids as a co-trustee now with them, so that if something happens to him, she's got Alzheimer's, and then this other child would be a co-trustee, they could act immediately and do things. So we kind of went through all the documents, not so much from a financial angle, but more as who's going to be the one making these decisions now that my sister has Alzheimer's.
That's a real complicated dynamic, and I guess people have these conversations around the holidays because people are together. I mean, we were talking about that before the show, that you had been traveling, and we traveled up to Georgia, and my brother, who lives in California, had come there, and so we get you don't necessarily get that opportunity to be face-to-face that often, and it's really important to use that moment to try to be strategic and do something that's going to be helpful. I know, Bill, we've talked about this so many times that, in this day and age of blended families and things like that, you have an idea of what you want. And we always say that the government has a plan for you. If you don't have a plan for you, it just may not be the plan you want. And so a lot of weird unintended consequences could follow just because somebody got married or somebody got divorced or things like that.
What we routinely get documents where, husband and wife, they never had kids. And in their documents, their successor trustees, their brother, and then, maybe the wife's sister, something like that. But all these people are the same age as them. So as they get into their 80s and they haven't looked at their documents in a while, I start going, well, you named your brother. Oh, he's passed away, and then, you've named your sister. Oh, she's not in real good shape right now.
Wow.
So, you have to pay attention to those people that you put in these decision-making roles.
Yeah.
Because they may not be there. They may not be able to do it.
Wow.
Especially if you're older and you've named siblings, generally you're all around the same age. So there can be a big problem with that.
Yeah. So if we were going to try to distill this down to, we've talked about a lot of the mistakes we could make along the way. What might be a productive thing to think about going into the holiday season that would kind of march us down the right road? Like, where would you say, obviously, if we don't have stuff, we need to do it. But what if we do have stuff?
The starting point would be, you should review your documents at a minimum every 3 to 5 years.
Uh-huh.
And most people do all these documents and then they stuff them away and never pull them out, never look at them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, the people you've named in these documents, has there been major life events that have affected them? Deaths, again, divorces, prison, things that, healthcare incidents that would render them unable to be your caregiver or
right.
your power of attorney, things like that. So you really need to keep all that in mind and the holidays is a really good time because it really brings to the forefront the family dynamics.
Yeah.
So that's always a good time to as you say, get your ducks in a row.
One of the thoughts is I think there's a factor in here that we don't probably talk about enough, which is the peace factor. It seems like, you see all the good, the bad, and the ugly. You see when somebody's done it right, how smoothly everything can flow. You stay out. We've done whole shows about avoiding probate and how expensive that can be and how time-consuming it can be under the best of circumstances. And then we've also spent shows where we've talked about, like, when the family dynamics are horrible, how brutal all of that can get. And so it seems like, peace and good tidings happen when you get all these ducks in a row, because now you've told everybody, here's how I want this to roll, and your paperwork backs that up. And so it's going to squash a lot of the, well, I think mom wanted this kind of conversations and help kind of keep peace in the family, maybe even.
Yes and no.
Or at least they taunt. I don't know.
Well, you can imagine, let's say mom's sick. She's a widow, and one of the kids is taking care of her. And this particular kid doesn't have a lot. Everybody else, the other siblings are well-to-do, but they don't lift a finger to help her.
Right.
So maybe mom goes in and changes her estate plan from splitting her assets equally amongst her children to maybe giving one of her children the house. And then split the rest, the one that's helping her and taking care of her. Well, if the other kids don't know that, and then mom dies, then they all of a sudden are like, oh, you abused your power as the caregiver to convince mom to leave you the house. However, if you break that out at Christmas and say, oh, by the way, I'm going to leave, Joey the house, and then we'll split the rest of it up. People may have some very strong feelings about that.
Yeah. But generally, it's still more helpful to have that figured out in advance rather than after the fact.
It's much more helpful to have that out there than after the fact, because after the fact, then, they make all these assumptions or allegations of undue influence, and it complicates things.
Wow. So again, if we're kind of like saying, like, let's get on the right road here, what would be the steps? Okay, so let's look at several different cases. Number one, we just have put this off. I guess step one is come to one of the conversations that you regularly have, because you do a lot of programs over at like One Senior Place and things like that are designed to help people start to move down that road, right?
We do. First is go to some seminars, learn the nomenclature, learn how assets pass. Take a a seminar on, powers of attorney and healthcare surrogates and long-term care financing, so that you have at least a working knowledge of how these things operate.
Yeah, you have a lot of good information. In fact, I think that book we were talking about, you can also download it directly on your website, floridaelderlaw.net.
Yes.
floridaelderlaw.net.
Correct.
That's a good site to bookmark because you can, because I think you have the schedule. Do you have a schedule of the talks and things that you have upcoming?
We just work off the schedule that One Senior Place puts out.
Okay, so if you go to oneseniorplace.com, you'll be able to see when Bill is speaking or someone from his office. But also, the floridaelderlaw.net site has a lot of good information. So if you don't have your paperwork, let's make that a New Year's resolution and get that going right now, because we've talked about it. It's the amount of money that you spend now is minuscule to the amount of money that could get involved if that it doesn't exist, and worse, it was done wrong.
Correct.
The second case is, let's talk about somebody who thinks they have it all jam up and jelly tight, but maybe it was done by an attorney years ago, or up north or something, or maybe it was done by a qualified attorney here, but it's probably been 10 years since it's been out of the little safe deposit box kind of thing or wherever they keep it. What would be your recommendation then? It should obviously be come in and let's go through it and see if this is still accurate.
Correct. Yes. Come through, see if everything's up to date, see if it's out of state documents, are they going to work in Florida? Does it have language that needs to be in there to make it work better in Florida? That kind of thing.
Is there a scenario that we haven't really talked about that we should talk about as we get to the? You need those documents, so let's get them. If you think you have them, let's review them. Is there a third case that we should think about? Maybe you're the son and you're worried about mom and dad.
Well, where are you going to keep the documents?
Okay.
We generally say, your safe deposit box or a fireproof safe. But of course, both of those, somebody either needs to know the combination for the safe, or somebody else has to be on the ownership of the box to get into the box to get these things.
Right.
So you got to think about how we may have all these great documents, but how are the people who are going to need to use them going to get to them? Yeah,
that's a real point, because if you say, well, I spent all this money and I have my health care surrogate and I have all this documentation, but if you get to the hospital and nobody can produce paperwork, it's probably not going to do what you wanted either.
Correct.
Yeah, so these are all the things you have to. Board certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson with the law office William A. Johnson, PA. I got to ask the question. I don't know how many attorneys exist in our county, Brevard County, and how many of them say, well, I'm an elder law attorney, which would be a subset of those. But out of all of those, we have a population of 650,000. Only 2 of you have taken the extra steps to become board certified, which means you're going well above and beyond the minimums to be able to practice in this area.
But that's just an elder law. We have a lot of board certified people in real estate law.
Right. But you need the specialist. Like if we're talking
Correct.
about elder law, you don't want to go see a real estate specialist, even though maybe property is part of this. You still need the elder law attorney because they understand how all that's looked as far as all these different planning things, Medicaid, VA, anything, estate planning, probate, all those questions. Those are things that need to come through an office from somebody who specializes in elder law. Am I saying that right?
You did.
Okay.
And I just got the email today. I got renewed for another 5-year term.
Wow. Well, congratulations. But I think it's important that you're going to get the best of the best because, it's too valuable. I can't think of many categories in your life. I would say get the best doctor you can because without your health, you don't have much. But, having some resources is better than not having resources. And so you want to protect all those things as best you can. So you want to get the best. So you want to find about when Bill is speaking at One Senior Place, go to oneseniorplace.com. You want to find out also about opportunities to get a hold of that book that we were talking about, that booklet, which I think you can get at floridaelderlaw.net. But if they have questions, how do they reach your office?
They can reach us at 321-253 1667.
Well, it's always a pleasure talking with you, Bill, and I always learn something every single time we sit down. But this is the time of year. Go ahead and make that New Year's resolution early. In fact, just go ahead and do it in December. Call Bill's office, get to one of those seminars, get that download, start educating yourself. This is an important area to learn about. And so with that, we're going to kind of shift gears, and I want to close out the show by reminding where I started the show, which is we are in holiday festivities, and you are invited. It's a week from tomorrow. So it's, I think we looked it up, it's December 12th, Thursday morning, and it's going to be 10:30 to 12 noon. We are doing the Helping Seniors holiday festivities over with our friends at the residences at Zon. That's that beautiful location, beachside. It's Indian Harbor Beach, 1898 South Patrick, 10:30 to 12 noon. We're going to take over that top floor. We're going to have Christmas holiday music, all kinds of fun with Uncle Nick, who is not only is he a fabulous singer and but he really is an entertainer. He's actually a character, which is what makes his show so much fun. So you got to come out, if for no other reason than to see Uncle Nick. But because it's at Zon, the food is going to be off the chart. They always come up with the most tasty snacks and things like that. And I also want to let folks know, that's an organization that has spent a lot of time focusing in on seniors. As you know, Bill, that was the first home for our senior resource center when Joe was working with Greg Kennedy, and they were first kind of architecting the concept. And here we are these years later with 5,600 square feet that after COVID, Dr. Delegdish with Omni Healthcare made available to the Helping Seniors organization. And that's now where our Senior Resource Center is. So normally we're meeting there, but for the holiday festivities, Greg and company invited us to come back. So it's fun. It's free. We need you to RSVP. How do you do that? You can go to the Helping Seniors website. HelpingSeniorsOfBrevard.org is one way to do it. HelpingSeniorsOfBrevard.org. By the way, if you enjoyed us talking today about some of the things that are legal things you want to know, every TV show, every radio show that we've ever done with Bill, just going all the way back, Bill, I remember early shows when you and Joe were tackling these topics. I mean, they're all there. They're all archived for you at HelpingSeniorsOfBrevard.org, but you can also RSVP for the event, and or you could call Karen and or our team of volunteers right there on our senior helpline. That phone number, 321-473-7770, 321-473-7770. And we will look forward to having you right back here on the radio next Wednesday, 12 noon to 1 p.m., because we always gather around the radio at lunchtime here on 90.3 FM. We'll see you next week. Have a great week till then.